and welcome all. Thank you for tuning in to Cedar Radio, your guide to films playing at the Art House for the week of January 11th to January 17th. My name is Aaron Spears.
And I'm Dave Huffman. On this week's episode, we'll be discussing Mimi Letters on the Basis of Sex and Julien Landais' The Aspern Papers.
We'll also be discussing Barry Jenkins' If Beale Street Could Talk, the Golden Globe Awards, who's really responsible for those Rickroll videos, and some trends found in the films of 2018 with our special guest, Dede Crimmins. Well, we always like to start off the episode with the last scene first, because we're backwards that way. So, Dave, what is the last film you've seen?
The last movie I saw was a wonderfully mediocre, completely time-killing action movie by Simon West called Stratton, starring Dominic Cooper. And I watched it because I wasn't feeling very well. I just wanted to lay on the sofa, and if I fell asleep in a movie, I didn't care. And so I was awake through the vast majority of it.
Unfortunately?
Well, no, it was fine.
Oh, yeah.
It is exactly what I wanted it to be, just a time killer. But I did doze off in the last 5 minutes of the movie, and I woke up and the credits were rolling, and I didn't even bother to watch the last 5 minutes that I missed because what was happening.
Got to go back and finish that.
Yeah, so we'll that was it. And definitely not it was a movie I don't recommend.
I think people who drink would call that a hangover movie, where you just put it on, sip some water, pass out, come to every now and then.
But I just needed to lay down and put a blanket on me and just watch something that I didn't really care about, just to have the company of it. So thank you, Dominic Cooper.
We're back to trash and art again.
Exactly.
With our picks here.
So what highbrow work did you watch?
That's not sarcastic. It was Zama, one of the foreign films I wanted to catch up on.
Yes, excellent.
It was a couple of days ago, and I didn't see anything since then. But it's Lucretia Martel's film from, I think it was the Argentinian submission for Best Foreign Film at the Oscars this year. One of my go-to film geek Bibles is the Film Comment end of the year. They do the critics poll, and it's a ranked system 1 to 20. And I was like, oh, well, Roma's going to win.
Yeah.
And it didn't. It was number 3 or 4, and Zama was number 1 by a decent margin there. And I was like, I always watch whatever the number 1 movie is, because it's usually great. Yeah. And it's great. The quick synopsis is a 17th century Spanish officer waiting to be transferred from this colonial outpost he's in charge of to Buenos Aires. And I'm sure some people might already be asleep just hearing that description. But it's got this wonderful depiction of what bureaucracy was like in the 1700s. He has to convince a local governor to write a letter of recommendation to the king to get him transferred, and then send it to the king. And that could be 6 months, could be a year. And then if the letter comes back saying, oh, no, you're not transferring yet, you got to resubmit. It's like...
He couldn't just text
him. Feel the time. Right, exactly. You feel the time in the movie, but not in a boring, it takes forever way. It's still, they do it in a very compelling way, because it's also the day-to-day existence of being a colonial power in, that era of the world. And it's pretty fascinating. I still think it's better than Roma.
Who put that out? Do you know who distributed it?
I do not,
no.
Okay. Played it with the Cinematheque. So
okay. Gotcha.
It got out a little bit, but not too far. So, look for that one streaming or video somewhere in the near future. So it's been a little while since we recorded, so we have a little bit of art house buzz, films at the art house to discuss. If Beale Street Could Talk, Barry Jenkins' new film is out and a hit. And we did not do an episode specifically dedicated to that one as a new film, but you've caught Beale Street
I've
already.
Seen Beale Street. Yes, it's a very good movie. He's a wonderful filmmaker, and I think Moonlight was a better movie, and I think my issue with the film is that the lead kind of actress in it, her character isn't that compelling ultimately, I don't feel like, but everything around her is more interesting. So it's kind of strange to have sort of a central character that you're not overly compelled by. So I think it's definitely going to get some Oscar consideration. Probably not Best Picture, but certainly Regina King is a likely Oscar winner, especially after her win at the Golden Globes and some other critics associations. So I think that there's definitely going to be some Oscar nominations for the movie.
It's interesting that you say the connection part with the main character, because is it one of those instances where that's the audience character taking you through the story, so it's supposed to be kind of like the audience vessel character, or is it supposed to be, because other people have said that it's like this overwhelming emotional story. They haven't necessarily said her specifically, but the whole movie just feels like they're just swelled up with emotion and the love and...
Yeah, but to me, she was the central. I mean, it is about her and her, the love story between her and her, wrongfully imprisoned
fiance,
boyfriend.
Eventual,
the father of her future child. They're not married or engaged or anything, but they and so since she's out, she's got a lot more. She's more the focus of it.
Yeah.
But I just felt like, and I can't remember the actress's name. So and I don't think that her performance was bad. But I almost feel like it just was. She wasn't that compelling of a presence, I guess. Or it could just be that other people around her were so much more.
That's true. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Either showier roles or had the juicier kind of things that she just kind of fell to the background a little to me.
So one of the things when I'm looking forward to a movie, like I got the book, so I haven't read this James Baldwin book before, and it's like 140 pages.
Yeah,
it's like an afternoon read. And I was like, no, I want to see the movie beforehand. But reading up on the movie, I found a couple interesting anecdotes. One, it's shot on film. He did 65 millimeter. And a quick shout out, there's a director's...
Wait, what format? You said 65 millimeter.
60 millimeter. Wait, no, he said 65 millimeter in the article.
Okay.
65.
Yes.
Is that the IMAX format?
Yeah, it's like, I just want to make sure you didn't mean 35 millimeter. That's all.
Oh, no, it's not 35.
Okay.
No, it's on film, but it was
he used a larger format.
Larger format,
Interesting.
yeah.
Okay.
And
I did not know that.
Directors Guild of America does a great podcast just called the Directors Guild of America, I believe, where they have one filmmaker interview another filmmaker. And I was in absolute heaven because they had Paul Thomas Anderson interview Barry Jenkins, and they just geeked out about film techniques and all this stuff. Yeah. And he had a couple of great gems that his production designer, Mark Friedberg, on If Beale Street Could Talk, when they were shooting in Harlem, there's a lot of gentrification going on in Harlem right now. And so he went in there and convinced a few property owners, like, if you let us shoot here, you could have the property where that James Baldwin movie was filmed. They're like, okay. And so he like weaseled his way in to get some like great locations that way. And then his longtime cinematographer, I'm drawing a blank, James Laxton, that Barry Jenkins, I guess, met in film school, which I didn't realize. I just noticed he had the same cinematographer on all of his movies so far, including his shorts, which makes sense. Seems that you met in film school. He's one of those cinematographers that does like 5 movies a year, which is amazing to me that this is just a craftsman.
Yeah.
But I always love finding that one nugget of like, you filmed that? And then so he filmed Tusk, the Kevin Smith movie. Which I was like, interesting that you can go from Tusk to, like, all right, yeah.
There you go.
You're just a journeyman cinematographer, so that's perfectly fine.
Well, that's like last night after I watched Stratton, I was looking at Simon West's filmography. And apparently he filmed the Never Gonna Give You Up Rick Astley video. So that was the deep dive on, so there's always some weird little skeleton.
So you can blame him for the Rickroll phenomenon?
I think you can, yeah.
Wow, interesting.
Never gonna give you up, never gonna let you down.
But then actually when I read that, I'm like, or is this just an internet joke? Is someone Rickrolling Simon West's IMDb page?
No, he came out of that Propaganda Films music video.
I just think it's fascinating, like weird little bits that people have on their filmographies.
I'm not making fun of James Laxton for that at all. It's always interesting to see those nuggets of like, oh wow, okay. I mean, you got to eat.
I will say this: the one thing that
pick up on
the one thing about Tusk I didn't hate was probably how it looked.
The cinematography, moving into the art house news for this week, it's that time of year, so it's award season. The Golden Globes were just this past weekend as we record, and the Golden Globes just constantly fascinate / frustrate me. We discussed it previously when the nominees came out.
Yeah, they're not. They don't have the best reputation as being the. It's a film. It's a Hollywood Foreign Press Association. They're not really like they're not really diehard film critics per se. They're kind of entertainment reporters and things. And most entertainment reporters, if you think about like Entertainment Tonight, like Mary Hart and those people, like it's that kind of that ilk of reporters. So not hard-hitting critics or something. Yeah,
not outwardly to the public hard-hitting. Yeah, I don't know what their private life is like, but it's...
So these are... it's fascinating when you look at the films that kind of get nominated, and sometimes they seemingly go out of their way to nominate as many films and different things to make sure that they get the most kind of stars to come to their awards thing, and it's kind of, there's always been a little bit of controversy about the system involved. And so whenever they announced the winners this last week, there was a little bit of confusion. Everyone was expecting A Star Is Born to win. It was certainly a huge hit and was a big critical success for the most part. And then the film that won was Bohemian Rhapsody, which was an absolute crowd favorite. Like when I'd see that in the theater, audiences literally applauded at the end of it. Yeah. But then critically, it's at like 49% or something like that on Metacritic. And so it's just not very well critically received. So you could say empirically, it's not quote unquote a good movie in that way. even though audiences like it, I enjoyed it. I don't think it's a bad movie.
Yeah.
But is it one of the best movies of the year? No. But it's a
drama of the year.
It's a very entertaining movie, certainly, and and it's got a lot of great elements to it and amazing music, and so now Bohemian Rhapsody won best picture, and will it get an Oscar nomination for best film? It might, just because people are so passionate about it.
Yeah, and it's got
There's a lot of people that
more
love
drive
it.
behind it now
Right.
too. Not even just best picture drama, but then Rami Malek won best actor as well.
And he was always kind of a shoo-in for an Oscar nomination, I would say, in the performance. But now the film kind of elevates it a little bit more into more serious contention for other things.
So one of the debates around here at the theater the last couple of days since the awards came out was constantly like, well, how does the voting work? Because like all the different organizations have different ways. So I looked up the Hollywood Foreign Press Association. Now in my head, when I hear Golden Globes, I just immediately think 90 people. 90 people are the tastemakers for this thing, and it's really kind of a nonprofit event they do to raise money for the goodwill that they do, so good on them for that. But again, it's 90 people, and they do rounds of voting. So the first round of voting to determine the nominees is a ranked voting of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, whatever. So like your favorite down to the fifth, and then points are assigned that way. But then the final vote is just pick one. So of the 90 people, enough of a majority of people for that particular category went with Bohemian Rhapsody. So it's not like, because if it was ranked voting, that Bohemian Rhapsody could be like everybody's number 2, and it gets number 1 because somebody else would rank like Roma no, that wasn't an option, like Black Panther number 1, but Star is Born's number 5. I did not like that musical, so it did have it is just a straight voting on that one in that case. But the best comedy, which. Again, the categories are baffling, but just remember the studios themselves submit to the category they choose, so it's kind of up to the studio, was Green Book, which is still going very
strong.
Very strong here at the theater since, that was our Thanksgiving movie, right?
Yeah, I think it opened up right around then.
It was. And Mahershala Ali getting Best Supporting Actor, which is very deserving because that movie rests entirely on the chemistry of he and Viggo Mortensen. And this is my weekly check-in. Did you watch Green Book
I
yet?
have not seen Green Book yet, but I promise that I will. It is starting to feel more and more like an obligation as opposed to something that I want to do, but I do want to see it.
Yeah.
And especially, I do always make sure that I see everything that gets serious awards attention.
Right.
And I'm trying to think of the last thing that I didn't see just out of
spite.
Yeah. And I can't even remember what
I definitely
it was.
have some awards spites in my past, but not off the top of my head.
There's a few of those, but so I don't have anything against anyone involved in Green Book. So
no,
no one's on my list.
Right.
So I will be seeing it. I just haven't gotten a chance. But there was the fact that Mary Poppins could have won that, but they went with Green Book for Best Musical or Comedy.
Oh, yeah, good
There's
point.
a lot of talk of that. The only thing in Mary Poppins didn't win anything. And Shallow, I think the song from Star is Born is the only thing Star is Born won was for the song. So Lady Gaga did get an award. She just didn't get the acting award, which was kind of expected. But I was happy to see Glenn Close win it because... We have been talking. We did a whole episode where we talked about,
how she's snubbed over the years.
And I was joking that we should have called that like Close but No Cigar, and where she keeps getting nominated for the Oscar and then never wins. And this year, hopefully, she will hopefully get a nomination, and hopefully she will win. Not only because it's an amazing performance, but because just sort of a legacy award. It would be one of those weird things. Like if Glenn Close has never won an Oscar, history will judge us in a very harsh way. It's like, how is that possible?
Yeah. Are you not watching what we're watching?
Because she's amazing, and it's a great film and a great performance. So I hope that she does get nominated and win, because now she's got a Golden Globe, and it actually was the first Golden Globe she won for a film performance.
Just not TV.
She won two TV awards, I think for like The Shield and some other stuff. But now she won an actual film one.
Right.
So it's strange that it took her this long to win a Golden Globe.
Before we go on to our next segment, I just want to recommend, if you did not watch the Golden Globe Awards, please YouTube Jeff Bridges' acceptance speech for the Cecil B. DeMille Award. We're not going to play it on the show because I don't know what copyright issues NBC might have, but it's hilarious. It's like the dude is accepting a Lifetime Achievement Award, but it steers off into crazy categories and different ways where you're like, why is he talking about Buckminster Fuller right now? But he brings it all around in the end, and it works out really, really nicely.
He's the most Jeff Bridges guy on earth.
So, absolutely. Yeah. So we'll be right back with the new films starting at the theater this week. Coming up this week at the theater, we're out of the holiday season, which means that the Met is back in theaters with Adrienne Lecouvreur. The live show will be on January 12th at 12:55 p.m. and the encore show January 16th at 6:30 p.m.
And this week we're going to be opening the new film On the Basis of Sex by director Mimi Leder. This is the true story of our Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, as it's kind of her story whenever she was meeting her husband and going through the kind of one of the defining cases that she argued in front of the Supreme Court before she was a justice to overturn a century of gender discrimination.
There are 178 laws that differentiate on the basis of sex. Women can work overtime. We have to get credit cards in our husband's name.
We're not allowed to work in the mines.
This is a man's world.
You think you can change the country? You should look to her generation. They're taking to the streets.
Protests are important, but changing the culture means nothing if the law doesn't change.
What did you say your name was?
Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I want to be a lawyer. I want to represent clients in pursuit of justice.
So they're going to give you a corner office?
I wasn't what they were looking for. One said women are too emotional to be lawyers. Another told me a woman graduating top of her class must be a real ball buster.
And interestingly, this film was written by her own nephew, so that's kind of probably gives a little more insight into.
He's got the
inside information there. And I just want to say, Mimi Leder, who's kind of always been known for more actiony stuff, like she actually directed probably my favorite modern disaster movie. She directed Deep Impact. A lot of people. It was the year of the battling asteroid movies, where everyone talks about Armageddon, which was to me just terrible. Whereas Deep Impact was a really chilling, effective movie where, like, I don't know how many hundreds of millions of people die in that movie, but it's like if you're going to make a disaster movie about the asteroid coming, that's the movie to actually have a little weight to it.
It was a little uneven, but at certain times you're just like, wow, they really nailed that scene.
It
That's
really
intense.
went dark. Yeah. It's a good movie. So it's interesting to see Mimi Leder, who's always been kind of this pretty successful female action director, making this much smaller, quieter little drama. She's done a lot of TV work as well more recently.
I say mostly TV. If you look at her whole filmography,
really, for the last 15 years or
so. Is it filmography if it's TV as well?
Yeah, we'll go with that.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. But it's gotten some mostly very good reviews. I haven't seen it yet, and I know that they were kind of positioning it for release this time of year, expecting it to be a little bit more of an awards contender.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's a chance that they could get some, is it Felicity Jones, correct?
Yeah.
Playing her. She could get an Oscar nomination, but right now she hasn't been on any of the kind of awards buzzy kind of things before that. So it's probably not going to happen for her, but I think that they were expecting it to when they kind of looked at this early January release.
Well, it's also primed perfectly with, as we've mentioned, probably ad nauseum to regular listeners now, that RBG was the biggest hit on the art house circuit here this past year. And so people, also given the current political climate that we're in, I almost said a documentary, a fictional version of, how Justice Ginsburg got her start, both as just a human being meeting someone that she connected with, getting married, starting a family, getting through college. And I think it's getting to like her first real kind of case, because I know the biography is kind of, she had problems, getting the job because she's a woman and there was discrimination on the basis of sex.
There you go.
And this was finally one of those breakthroughs working with the ACLU to argue sexual discrimination. But the trick with this movie, not the trick, the little flip with this movie is that it was against a man that spurs on this whole court case that she ends up, going on to successfully argue. It's another long line of those based on a true story, though, where like, we all know how it ends. Yeah. Can you make it dramatic along the way?
Well, I think that audiences, obviously, she's a revered person in this country by a little over half the country, probably.
I was just thinking, I wonder what the math is on that. But
I don't know. But obviously, right now with her health and things like that, and her being in the news, there might be people that want to come out and just kind of,
see how it all started.
Yeah, revel in her legacy on the big screen.
And it feels like having someone like a family member, extended family member, writing the screenplay. And I looked up. I was trying to see if anybody had asked the actual Justice Ginsburg like about the movie or anything, and I wasn't finding stuff immediately. But like you said, she's had some health issues, so the press may not want to bug her about this fictional movie about her early life.
She's got more important things. She's got
important things that are going on, and the Supreme Court's starting back up.
Yep.
The other film we're opening this week is the Aspern Papers, directed by Julien Landais, I believe, because he's a French director. So I'm hopefully pronouncing that one correctly. It is set in Venice in 1885 as Morton Vint, an ambitious young writer, fascinated by an iconic romantic poet, Jeffrey Aspern, strives to get his hands on the letters that Aspern wrote to his mistress to kind of get a deeper understanding of his favorite writer's biography and his real life there.
She would never accept money for anything so valuable. Duplicity is my only course.
I don't know what she has. She keeps her things locked up.
Has your aunt always held you back so?
She has a much easier life than I did when I was her age.
What papers of value could they possibly have?
They may contain some painful memories.
I don't think that they're painful in that way.
This film, everybody out there who is a fan of classic literature, it's based on a Henry James novella. I think it's one of his most popular, actually. I don't know really how to rank the classics, but that one, it pops up when you Google him and the works that he has. It's definitely near the top. And it also stars the perfect Vanessa Redgrave.
She is amazing.
Well, actually, based on the trailer, it kind of looks like she kind of co-stars. Jonathan Rhys-Meyers is famous actor from The Tudors. He's the one who's searching for the papers, and I think she's kind of the one guarding the papers there. So first feature by a French director who's done a lot of shorts, which I couldn't find anywhere to see, so I'm not really sure what his wheelhouse of directing and projects are so far. But it's very lush cinematography. You can tell just by the trailer. It's all shot in Venice. It was set in Venice. It premiered at the Venice Film Festival.
Well, there you go.
So it couldn't be more Venice. So there's definitely a contingent at the art house that loves just like the great costume work, the great architecture shots, the great beautiful landscapes of certain movies. So if you're a Henry James fan and all those things push your buttons, we have the Aspern Papers today. 1 week only engagement here at the theater.
And this weekend, we have our monthly screening as part of the Melt Bar and Grill Late Shift of The Room. That is Saturday, January 12th at 10 o'clock p.m. And if you're a fan of The Room, save your ticket stub and then head over to the Capitol Theater on Sunday, January 13th for a special showing of Best Friends Volume 2 starring Tommy Wiseau and Greg Sestero. And that show is going to include a live in-person Q&A with Greg Sestero, who of course plays Mark from The Room. And this week for our Cedarly 3, we're going to be doing something a little different as we look back onto the year that was 2018, as we talk about some of the best films and trends and things like that of the year in film. And we've got a special guest today with us to talk about a trend that she noticed this year in 2018, and that is Dede Crimmins, who is a local film critic that writes for Rue Morgue and Birth Movies Death and High Def Digest, and we see her a lot at the press screenings here at the Cedarly, and she's always got opinions, so we invited her on to talk. Hi, Dede.
Oh, hello.
And so you're going to talk today and pick 3 films about a trend that you kind of noticed in 2018. So, and I don't know what your trend is going to be.
No.
So what's your trend?
My trend, and this is a trend that isn't necessarily unique to 2018, but it's one that's continued over the past several years, and I'm really happy to see continuing.
Cool.
Is really complicated but imperfect female lead characters.
Great.
I think that back in like the 60s and 70s, we had this whole rush of really strong women, but they were infallible and they were Wonder Woman and nothing could shake them. And I don't like that.
Yeah.
I like to see women that are imperfect. I like to see women that are villains and have really interesting motivations, and you can kind of understand them but don't want to hang out with them. So I noticed this coming up in the 3 films that I noticed this in specifically were Hereditary with Toni Collette's character, the wife.
Okay.
Because that character is just has so much going on. The filmmakers actually took time to get to know her and get to know what her motivations were and explore that really thoroughly. And then The Favorite. This is good. So those are 3 very
You got multiple women like that in The Favorite.
Man.
Yeah.
I mean, specifically when I was thinking about imperfect women who are very driven, I was thinking about Emma Stone's character. Because Rachel Weisz kind of fits into that old version of like a villain, but like Olivia Colman's character is so tragic. So it's just, I like seeing all these women, like they don't have to be perfect to be interesting. And I think that traditionally a lot of male characters get to be torn apart a little bit more, and women, it's really nice to see them be given the time to explore their options.
Yeah, when you talk about Glenn Close and The Wife, think about if that movie had been made like in the 50s or 60s. What would the movie called The Wife be made, or what would that movie have been if it had been made back then? It would
I
have been
really want to see a Douglas Sirk version.
Completely. That's exactly what I was thinking of.
Just a lot of staring out of windows and crying, but I'm there for it. Yeah.
Since you started off with like the 60s, 70s archetypes there, do you think maybe that's just the first stages in getting to more developed female roles over the years? Because, I mean, there were so many breakthroughs there. It was like kind of the first time, I was thinking for some reason of Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore was the first one that popped into mind. Because Dave knows I'm a Scorsese freak, so that was,
well, and
I had to go back to that one.
That's actually my favorite Martin Scorsese movie.
That one was, that's a separate conversation. But kind of getting better roles in that era with the new Hollywood kind of coming in and getting more diverse and a lot of times working class characters on screen kind of helped break the mold a little bit. So maybe it's like the first instances of getting strong female characters, even if they are like not the most flawed and imperfect and more human characters. And then, are we just finally getting to that point where that's, a more common theme in current film?
I hope so. I was thinking definitely like Norma Ray, like the whole just like we're here and we're women. It's like, well, but you're so many other things,
right?
Yeah. And I had actually part of this was, though I didn't include this, was when I interviewed Karine Kusama for A Destroyer.
Nice.
And we kind of talked a little bit about how no one, like the whole like grizzled cop drama, no one's ever asked the grizzled cop dudes like, can you have it all? Can you have family and all this thing? So I do think that there's a little bit of misogyny built into the whole, like, we need to have really complicated characters because women need to balance family and work.
Right.
Yeah. And I like the fact that they're actually like, maybe they don't have any of those things. They're still really interesting people.
Because even a lot of the male roles in that genre, it's always like the family is the downfall or like this horrible problem that he can't hold together. And
they're a divorced guy, but they have a great divorce. Like their wife is taking care of the kids. The wife is remarried. Their kids are in good shape. Like, and then they can finally focus on like catching the bad guy. Like that is just such an archetype, and no one's ever asking those characters like, can they have it all? Because they're showing that they can't. Yeah. So I think like I mean like you can go back to like even like Scarlett O'Hara. It's just like she's a fascinating character, but she's not super complicated. She's fairly one note, but you still want to watch her. So I like that, like especially with Glenn Close and The Wife, like you're watching her and you're like, I know exactly what's happening on her face, but I have no idea where she's coming from because I cannot relate to this experience. So you just want to spend more time with her to get to crawl in her head a little bit more. Yeah.
I also like the examples you gave because usually when you're dealing with like typical Hollywood female roles, it's more of the young, attractive, ingenue kind of characters, and all the ones you mentioned are more or less what they would, what Hollywood say would be middle-aged or over the hill or whatever.
Except for Emma Stone.
I was thinking like Olivia Colman.
I got you.
The favorite, but that there's just a much there's just better options for high-quality actresses as they age, as we all do, going into the later parts of their career. In the case of Glenn Close.
Yeah, and when you talk about Hereditary, which we have. Both of us, I think, say is like the best performance of the year, and it's just insane that Toni Collette is not an Oscar contender or has been completely shut out. I mean, we shouldn't say she's not an Oscar contender since those haven't come out yet. The indications are leading us to think that she won't get an Oscar nomination, but I just think that is one of the best performances I've seen in like a decade, and it just makes me sad that she's not getting the attention she deserves for that role.
Yeah, and that role in particular, like she is like mourning the loss of her mother, but it's not like, oh, my mom, I loved her so much. Like it's a complicated, interesting, and incredibly relatable experience for her to go through. And then she's a mom. She's not the best mom. Like it's just like she's not the best.
She's
wife.
Definitely not the best mom.
But it's just like to get to know her character a little bit more, so you understand where she's coming from through all of this stuff that her character's going through. Like I appreciate that because I mean it's so often just like especially in horror films, like it's one note. It's like here's mom. It's like she's going to be making dinner, and you don't know if she has a job or not. So
which was even in that very first scene in Hereditary. I think it's the first scene when she's doing the eulogy, where it's not just your standard. Oh, we should all start crying. Like that. As soon as it started up, it was like, oh, one of these tropes. But her performance is so layered, even in the eulogy, where like you can tell she does miss her mom, like it's the death of a family member. But also, you're like, oh, this looks complicated. She's just expressing a whole range on her face aside from what she's saying.
And then you find out later how complicated that family's history really is.
Yeah.
So it's a horror movie for a reason.
It is, and I'm glad you brought up the age thing because I almost, as I started to think about, because I did want to do something that was female focused, and because there's been so much going on there, particularly this year or last year, I should say. But I started looking at it. I was like, oh, a lot of the really interesting roles were going to older women. Because, like, if you look at If Beale Street Could Talk, like, as amazing as that film is, the lead female character is kind of like a wet blanket to me. Like, she has
totally
nothing going on except for that one amazing scene at the department store counter.
Right.
But then Regina has all this amazing stuff going on. So, like, she was clearly given the more interesting role there.
Right.
Well, we had talked when we were coming up with our kind of best performances by actors and best performances by actresses this year. We both kind of said that it was really hard to narrow down the list for actresses because there have been so many great roles and performances by women. And this year, I don't think that there's that many standout performances by men. I don't think that I was nearly as impressed by what the guys were doing on screen this year as I was by the ladies.
Yep. And I have to, for critics organization I'm in, we do voting every year. And it's almost always the fact that the best actor is hard to narrow down and the best supporting female is hard to narrow down. It was kind of flipped this year. Yeah,
it's interesting. It's that's also kind of a trend, I guess, for this year. Just that it did seem like there was much better roles and better performances, I think, by women than by guys on screen.
Which is just knowing like how film production works. It's probably development of the Me Too era and kind of calling out, horrible male predator behavior. But the way that it would take, more than a year for any movie to make, or especially like a Barry Jenkins role or something like that, where they take their time and, really cultivate a script and then, get the project going. This was always just sort of going to happen anyway, maybe this year. I don't necessarily think that the Me Too movement necessarily pushed it forward as far as how the critics receive it and how the audience receives it, I think. But some of these movies, they were, in production or were written and getting going before that. So I think it's just an interesting coincidence, or that's just the cycle of Hollywood and production and how...
And who knows? Maybe this year's going to be terrible.
Yeah,
and it could be the opposite. Like we all act like, and even like Sandra Oh's introduction at the Golden Globes this week.
Real.
She's like, this moment, this is, and she's like, and maybe next year won't be like this. It's like, you're right, it might not be. You don't know.
Like
it might just go right back to how it was. Who knows? But for right now, I don't think it's going to go back. Usually, it's hard to put the thing back in the bottle. What's the expression? It's hard to put the thing back in the bottle. Oh, the toothpaste. Great. It's hard to put the toothpaste back in the tube.
Well, I can imagine. I've never heard that before, but
you've never heard that expression? No. Well, I'm coining it now.
Okay, done. But like back to like the Me Too movement and things like that. Like I do think that that's an important driver behind this. But like, I mean, everyone might think I'm crazy in saying this, but I think The House That Jack Built is one of the most feminist films of the year. And I will argue that. And so I think you can and should have male-led films addressing violence against women. But I think that, Number Cruncher somewhere figured out a couple years ago that films led by women make more money, and I don't know why they don't make more of them. And now the fact that we have Captain Marvel coming out, like maybe they're just kind of like, oh wait, we're okay with this. Like, oh, we can make money, cha-ching, like let's do it. So
that's all that matters. That's the almighty dollar.
Yeah,
that's a trend of every year. All right.
So that ties into your kind of theme here. The House That Jack Built. That one is. Do you want to unpack that a little bit, or?
Have you guys talked about this yet?
No. We mentioned
a little bit
here, and we talked about it a little bit, but nothing too in depth.
So that's the Lars von Trier or Trier.
I go Trier.
You said it both ways, so that covers bases.
Very good. We're big fans of pronouncing things multiple ways.
Oh, excellent. So. I'll think of a third one while I'm talking. So that is his film that is about a serial killer who is played by Matt Dillon, and the film is insanely structured. It is 5 different, tableaus of him killing women very violently. But Jack himself, like if you pay attention to it, and I've read reviews, and I don't know if they missed it or if they listened to him, he is the most unreliable narrator ever, and I was laughing hysterically throughout it. Yeah. He's like, I'm so smart. No, he's an idiot. He's such an idiot. And you're just watching this really dumb guy go on and on for 2.5 hours about how awesome he is. And you're like, this is the most lampooning film of toxic masculinity I've ever seen. He is awful. And he's just, all of these women he's killing, no one deserves to get killed. And the only reason he gets away with it is because it's just like dumb luck. Like the cop turns the other direction. Like, oh my God. But you're just watching this and you're just like, this is what all these dudes, serial killers have thought up until this point, in both in real life and in film. And this film is making a mockery of it. It's not just saying like, you don't deserve this, you're a horrible person. It's just like, I'm going to laugh at you, which is the number one way to take down someone.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So watching that film and just how it unfolds, like I was watching it. And then I read tweets afterwards because I went to the one night where it had the director's cut and I saw it here at the Cedar Lee. And all these people are like, oh, violence against women. I'm like, well, yeah, that's not good. But if you're making fun of the people who are doing it,
then you have to put it, like too often people just want to black and white every situation. And that movie to me, like I said, is very much a dark comedy.
Yes.
And it is kind of, like you said, sort of almost a satire of that kind of person. So.
Yeah, without getting into the ending at all. Like the ending, if anything, upholds the fact that this guy is so dumb and he just deserves everything coming to him. And yeah.
Well, thank you for stopping by and sharing your trend, and also the extra little tidbit on House That Jack Built. I thought it was also a hilarious satire and comedy, so glad to know I'm not alone, because I felt that way when I was looking online, you were saying as well. Speaking of online, do you want to let people know where they can read some of your reviews and criticism? And we'll link in the show notes, but auditorially.
So you can find me. I do wide release reviews every week at highdefdigest.com. You can also find me on Birth Movies Death, doing thought pieces and interviews occasionally there. And I'm also on Rue Morgue magazine, which is also online.
Sweet. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
On next week's episode, we will be discussing Correda's new film, Shoplifters. The Palme d'Or winner at the Cannes Film Festival in 2018 finally arrives at the theater. And we'll also be discussing 3 art house favorites from the year of 2018 with special guest Mike Wendt of the Cleveland Film Commission. As always, thank you for tuning in to Cedar Lee Radio and lending us your ears this week. All the music heard on the show is original music written by Grant Heineman and performed by the New Heights Jazz Ensemble, used with their permission, of course. Visit clevelandcinemas.com for correct showtimes and to purchase advance tickets. Also, there are links in the show notes. You can use those if you'd like as well. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We are at Cedar Lee Theater, spelled with an R-E at the end because we're fancy like that. Don't forget to subscribe to the show wherever you find your podcast, and while you're subscribing, leave us a rating and review, or better yet, tell a fellow film geek about the show. We'll see you at the movies.